something like their sexuality. And we're looking for your input today, your thoughts on this, about maybe your own coming out, about your feelings, about your place in the community. Maybe you have a son or daughter who is a part of the LGBT community. We'd love to have you share your thoughts on it. And if you don't want, we don't have to use your name or the community you're calling from. Our number is 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. My guest here in the St. John studio, Robin Noseworthy, a regular member of one of our panels. Hi, Robin.
Hi, John.
And Jamie Harnham, hi, Jamie. Both vice presidents of the St. John's Pride, Inc., and Danny Coombs, who's president of St. John's Pride. He's in our studio in Corner Brook. Hi, Danny.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, thank you. First of all, let's talk about St. John's Pride in case people are not familiar with it. Robin, what exactly is St. John's Pride, Inc.?
St. John's Pride, Inc. is an organization. It's a not-for-profit organization. It was incorporated a few years ago by Jennifer McCreath. And basically, we're the ones that are responsible for organizing the week-long festivities that happen in July here. We also happen to do a lot of work, fundraise. We did a couple of events last year, fundraising prior to that event, and our goal is just basically to get the education out, make people aware that we are here as a support group, and to work alongside certain allies within the community. And it's mostly just to celebrate the diversity that is within the community of St. John's and outer areas.
Now, St. John's Pride still encompasses the rest of the province. Jamie, do you want to speak to that?
There are Pride events that happen in other towns and cities around Newfoundland, but St. John's Pride is definitely the biggest one. So you do get people coming in from other areas of Newfoundland.
Right. And Danny, what about you? Were just visiting Corner Brook, but I'm just wondering, what about the presence of Pride organizations in areas like Corner Brook or Grand Falls, Gander, places like that?
The only one I've ever really seen so far was in Corner Brook, and I already asked a few people out here already since I've been out here, and they said that they had a blast and they can't wait for next year. So there is Pride happening in Corner Brook, and they just want to make it bigger every year, kind of like what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Tell me, is it any different for people, members of the community these days, in terms of coming out and human rights violations and all that stuff? Jamie, do you want to speak to that?
Compared to in the past?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I definitely think that because LGBT issues are rising in the media and they're becoming more at the forefront, it's definitely getting a lot easier. Obviously, there still are challenges that people are facing when they come out, but and it is an ongoing process, but it has been getting easier as time's gone by.
Tell me, what's your own story?
My coming out story?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a trans-identified person, so I kind of came out twice. The first time when I came out as queer, so attracted to people of the same gender as my own and different genders. And then the second time, about less than a year ago, I'd say, when I came out as trans. So I was really fortunate, and I have a really great circle of friends, and my family has also been really supportive of me. I know there are definitely people who have been less lucky, especially when coming out as trans, which is a little bit less well known, so there is a little bit of education that has to happen there just to come out, because if you say, well, I'm trans, then sometimes people are like, okay, well, what does that mean? But I think I was really lucky, and everybody's been really supportive.
Yeah. When you say you're trans, and you say a lot of people say, what does that mean? Let me be one of those. What does that mean?
Definitely. So a trans person or a transgender person is basically just anybody who doesn't identify or doesn't always identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. So when someone's born, we usually say, okay, well, that's a little girl or that's a little boy, right? And then it's kind of like, okay, well, that means that this little boy is really going to like playing with trucks or, grow up to do something masculine or things like that. So all that being trans means is that when you grow up, you stop and you think, well, that doesn't quite work for me. Like, I don't really identify with the word girl. Like, I don't think I'm a girl. I just think of myself as a person without having any gender markers, because I don't identify as male or female. It is different for some trans people who just identify as, for example, somebody who is born and they say, okay, well, that's a little girl, and they grow up, well, actually, I'm a boy.
Yeah, but physiologically, you must identify one way or the other, don't you?
Well, I mean, obviously, my body parts have certain names, but that doesn't necessarily, you don't have to put a gender on those, right? Because they're just like, your nose doesn't have a gender, for example, like it's just a nose. They're not girl noses and boy
I was having coffee with one of my friends last night, and she told me that she would chase people into the bathrooms and waited for them to come out. Yeah, so that did make it a lot easier, but after like I moved away and I came back, it's just been more accepting. A lot more people have come out, and I just have nothing, like I did grow up with like, bad experiences, but now I've had people who used to make fun of me apologize, and it's been a lot better now. It does get better.
Robin, how about you?
I as well came out when I was 15. Actually, I was outed, and it was quite a difficult time for my friends and my family, and over the years, as I progressed and became more comfortable with myself, and my parents became more comfortable with who I was, it has gotten a lot easier. I find that the whole "it gets better" kind of slogan that people come about is a very difficult thing for people to cope with. However, it is some truth to it, but unfortunately for some in our community, they're not quite as strong as to wait that long. I was fortunate enough to be one of those people that could wait it out, and that is the big important part of what our organization does. We're saying it gets better, but we're kind of a vessel that allows you to see that.
Wow. All right, let's go to the phone, 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255, and Brian is on the line from St. John's. Hi, Brian.
Well, John, hello to your guests. I just have one question, and before I ask it, I am in no way prejudiced or biased against anybody. Live, let live. That doesn't bother me a bit. But I often wonder about the significance of these last few years' parades. Why do you have parades? What does that accomplish? I'm just curious.
Robin?
I can ask the same question. Why do we have a Christmas parade? Why do we have a St. Patrick's Day parade? Why do we have any kind of parade?
Santa Claus, so.
Well, what are we celebrating, though, when we have those kind of parades? We're celebrating the belief of the system of Christmas. We're believing in the faith of Christmas, the love that surrounds Christmas. And when we have those parades, it's a way that we can get people together. It's a way that we can all unite together, and we stand together, and we stand with our allies as well as much as with ourselves. And we celebrate the diversity that is LGBT, straight, anything in terms of sexual diversity, and that's one of the it's the most visible thing that anybody can do in terms of their beliefs. And it goes back again to Christmas, St. Patrick's Day, any kind of parade that you see walking down the street. The reason is the celebration. It's to allow people to join in that celebration and to see the visibility of that celebration.
But without going too far down this path, one of the things that I always look at, see the earmark of these parades is the overt sexuality that's displayed, and that's what some people find offensive.
And that's the point I was trying. I mean, as I said, I'm not prejudiced or biased, and
let's let Robin or Jamie speak.
Okay, go ahead.
Robin, okay.
The reason, sorry, Jamie, I'm going to take this one. Back in 1969, back in Stonewall in New York City, there was it was the very first movement of LGBT movements that came about, and historically, the reason why it is the way that it is in terms of highly being sexualized and everything was the story behind that is there was a bar in New York City, it was a tavern, and it was home to transgender drag queens, minorities from Puerto Rico. It was the most visible minority possible, and the police walked in there one night and a riot started because these people were getting arrested and thrown down on the ground, and it was the drag queens and the Puerto Rican minorities and the LGBT network there that started throwing their shoes at the police while they were getting arrested in the streets. And a part of why it's overly sexualized is because those were the people that started this movement. And so we go out there and it's not how we dress every day, it's not how we act every day, but in part of it there's a historical celebration as to why this happens. And it's because of what happened in 1969 in Stonewall.
But Brian's point, I don't want to take up Brian's argument, but Brian's point is, and Danny, let me bring you into this. Brian's point is that why would you want to sexualize the parade when, is the point that Robin just made. Why do we have Christmas parades? Why do we have St. Patrick's Day parades? Well, we don't display overt sexuality, whether it's heterosexuality or homosexuality in those parades, so why do we do it on a gay pride parade? Danny, do you want to speak?
That was my point. Again, I had to emphasize. I'm going to get off.
Yeah, okay, Brian.
But I just want to ask that question.
I appreciate it.
To all of you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Danny, do you want to pick up that question?
Well, actually, first of all, it's not a gay pride parade anymore because it started off as a gay pride parade, as basically as like But yeah, like when you have like to me, this is what I feel like with Pride. Like yes, it may be overly sexualized, but it does grab people's attention to look at us and know exactly what we stand for. Because if we all just walked down the street and we weren't chanting or we weren't, wearing what people do wear, although I don't personally do it myself, nobody wants to see that. We want attention, not to keep people away from the parade. It'll get people to notice us and pay attention. And also, I keep thinking about 2 years ago when we had You Are Not Alone. I keep thinking that if we were walking down the street in the parade and there was a kid that is, at like a coffee shop, and he's feeling, bad about his life because people make fun of him because he's gay, then he sees people walking down the street that are just like him, and he knows that he's not alone, and people can just go out and be themselves and be who they are, then that's something that we can accomplish. Just letting people know that we are in the city, and they are not alone.
We have a tweet that says, I don't think we need to be more aware of the LGBT community per se, but rather of the discrimination and hardship that they face. Is that true, that there's still a lot of discrimination and hardship that people in the community face?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, we've made really great strides in the past 20, 30 years since queer rights have kind of come to the forefront, but there still are a lot of issues that people are dealing with, a lot more, I'd say, subtler in some ways, just because it's not so overt. Okay, well, maybe people aren't going to openly say negative things towards you in public, but for example, you could get turned over for a job for someone who is straight, or for someone who simply looks straight, as strange as it is to say that there is a certain look. Sometimes there are people who you look at them and you think, well, that might be a non-straight person. That person might be queer, and so it's like, it's very easy to turn past that person and hire the other person, regardless of what reason you make up to justify that, right?
So, and in terms of things like renting an apartment or that kind of stuff, is that still a discrimination that's out there in some form or another? Robin?
I've never specifically dealt with that. However, I find that females, in my opinion, have it a little bit easier because sexuality is very fluid amongst us. My thing is, employment-wise, I mean, for me specifically, I work with children, so it's my mom was very, very concerned about me going and being so open and everything like this, because you don't know exactly whose parents of these children are on the pool deck, and if they happen to find out, what your sexuality is, there's still a lot of very negative cliches and very negative stereotypes when it comes to the LGBT community and children and, the whole pedophile issues and everything else like this, and that's an ancient belief, but that's a belief that was kind of instilled in me before I came out in terms of my employment areas. I've been out since 15. I've only been out at work probably the last 6 years. So, and I'm 27, so that says a lot.
Tell me, Danny, what's the situation in smaller areas? Is it more difficult for members of the community in smaller areas? I don't necessarily mean Corner Brook, but in Goose Bay or Stephenville or St. Anthony. Does that make it more of a challenge?
I really can't speak on behalf of those communities because I've never really heard of anything about them, but here in Corner Brook, I can tell you that's never been an issue. Although, at the same time, I've only ever had one job here in Corner Brook, but it was never an issue for me. I haven't heard any of my other, peers or anything mention that they found it hard to find a job because of their sexual preference.
Yeah. And before we go back to the phones, I wanted to pick up on you mentioned last time you were here on a panel, Robin, about the flag flying at Confederation Building. You were hoping to get the Pride flag flown to Confederation Building. And I want to pick up on a point that Brian made, the last caller. Why would Pride want to make that a flag on Confederation Building any more than the people of the BIS would want to make a St. Patrick's Day flag on Confederation Building? Why do you think you need to be singled out?
I feel that St. Patrick's Day is something that is generally accepted as something, whether or not you're Protestant or Catholic, you kind of say, okay, well, there's St. Patrick's going on right now. Let people believe and celebrate what they want to believe in. Right now, we're seeing a very big shift in LGBT communities. We have the Sochi Olympics in Russia right now, where the gay Olympians and stuff are being told not to show, their individuality and their diversity, or they could be threatened with, criminal activity. We have cases of homophobia in terms of violence towards children in the United States that are happening right now. And what people don't realize is that Pride is here in St. John's, it's here in Toronto, it's here in Vancouver, it's in New York, it's everywhere. There are so many different Pride organizations, and what they don't realize is that it's an international need to get together so that we can have kind of a provincial government support, because there's things in government that are happening that need to be changed, like especially with trans rights and gender identification. We had a restructuring of the school boards that happened a couple years ago, or about a year ago actually, with Susan Rose with Egale, where they were going in and retraining all the principals and administrators, because bullying programs for the last 25 years have not included LGBT issues, and it's saying that, we're not important enough to make this something, being allowed for these kids to know that this is not right either. So while the provincial government is, instituting new curriculum, with the amalgamation of the school board now, but that's being put on the back burner for another year, where they're going to start retraining the teachers, so that the administrators and the guidance counselors are trained, but the teachers aren't. And so there's still kids that are going through the high schools, and they're coming out to teachers first, because they're the ones, let's be honest, who are with the kids most of the time rather than the parents, and sometimes it's easier to grasp what an adult's kind of attitude is. And these teachers, some of them either don't know what to say, are flabbergasted at it, or they put their own religious and personal beliefs into it, and this is just shattering self-esteem. So while the provincial government is changing all this structure in our education system, even though it's on a bit of a hold, why can't they show the global support, and then you can push for more rights to be introduced and fought for within Parliament?
Danny, do you want to weigh in on that before I go back to the phones?
Well, again, it's just, it's hard actually for me to explain, because that was only, that issue was only brought to me, last year, that we should have it on the building, because it'll be more visible than, to me, it'll be more visible, it'll get people to ask questions. That's basically all I can say on that.
All right. Okay, let's go back to the phones. Before I do now, just stand by on the phones. I'll give the numbers in a second, but I wanted to get you to weigh in on this as well. The community, remember the young man paralyzed in an attack last week in Nova Scotia. The community needs to remember that it can be dangerous to be out. And this is the young man who was stabbed and paralyzed from the waist down. So there still is that danger of being out. Do you understand that? Do you worry about that?
Definitely. That is something that, as a queer person, it becomes a part of your consciousness, you know that even though we have come such a long way, you know that when you come out to someone, there is a certain aspect of danger to it, whether it's that you think that you will actually be attacked, which is less likely, but still definitely possible, or if you just think that someone that you were getting along with will turn away from you.
Did you want to say something, Robin? No.
Well, I was just going to, absolutely fully agreement that there is this fear that is set in, but going back to the paralyzed man in New Glasgow, from what I've read in the articles and stuff, there's only a hint that it was homophobia. Nothing has actually been fully saying that it is, and I'm not saying that it isn't, but I think that there's an absolute fear amongst people who walk streets at certain times of the day that, anybody could be attacked. We see it on George Street all the time, that there are random fights that get broken out, but there's always that, I find it's high school mentality of walking through the hallways and getting sneered and snickered at that, happen downtown on George Street a lot more, and there's a lot, from my opinion, verbal violence that is going on, and sometimes that ends up being escalated, especially when people try to stand up for themselves, be it walk away or say something back. And I find that people just look for markers on diversity and they just jump for it for whatever reason.
All right, let's go back to the phone, 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Let's go to Conception Bay North and say good afternoon to Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hi, John, and hello, everyone. Of course, I had to call in about this, and because to me, it's about education. I'll just throw this out. As a national organization, we've completed a national student survey from coast to coast to coast. That opened the doors to ministries of education. Obviously, we're just about to launch our teacher survey.
Who's this, just so in case people are not familiar with your organization, Susan?
Well, Robin mentioned us already, Egale Canada Human Rights Trust, and we have been here in the province for the past 3 years, and yes, we have trained first we trained the ministry, we trained various people involved with curriculum and programming within the 5 school boards, and then we traveled around the province and we trained every principal, vice principal, and guidance counselor on, that was a full-day workshop, John, and it was on the importance of addressing the LGBT youth in their schools.
Okay.
And so and Robin did touch on something there, and I won't comment on that because we are are coming back to train the teachers, and then we're going to roll out curriculum, because the fact is, in Canadian schools today, from K to 12, we have far too many schools where we're completely excluded from the curriculum, meaning that we're not worthy enough to be included. We're not considered valuable enough as members of society. Let's not forget, we're about 10% of the population. And when we look at provincial budgets in education, and we look at, we take Newfoundland and Labrador, I think it's about $1 billion budget in education, we're 10%. And when we think about that, for years, we have been completely left out of the education system. To me, it's appalling. So I got to commend the government of Newfoundland and Labrador for this. We are leading the way in LGBT education in Canada because of this training. We're doing all kinds of stuff with various boards across Canada, but there's no provincial initiative like we're doing in Newfoundland and Labrador. The other thing I want to bring out, and then I'm going to hang up, I'm in Conception Bay North, enjoying a beautiful sunny day, by the way. But I just want to say that when we look at, it's not only our educators, it's a complete societal shift. We have faculties of education producing teachers that do not do one course in who we are as people. Gay is different from lesbian, is different from bisexual, is different from transgender. We have physicians, we have social workers graduating from our universities that have no idea who we are. So we have a lot of work yet to do. It's great that the three people you have with you there did not experience too much homophobia or transphobia. However, we cannot forget, and if you want more information on that, go to our website, Egale Canada, and you can see a copy of our student survey. We also did a school board survey too, John, from coast to coast to coast. We know what boards are toxic for our queer community and what boards are celebrating. So we've got a lot of work yet to do,
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like Jennifer is talking about here, a lot of the issues that trans people face are sort of ingrained in policy in various departments of the government, in the healthcare system, things like that, which is something that obviously trans activist groups are working very hard to change. And it becomes really difficult when you have gone through the process of understanding who you are and what you need to do to feel happy within yourself, and then there are all these barriers in your way that you have to get through in order to get to the next part of your process, which is different for everyone, of course. But I mean, for example, in Newfoundland, you can't get your gender marker changed on your ID unless you've had a very expensive and invasive surgery. And it becomes a risk, really, because every time you get ID'd, again, there's that present chance that the person that you're talking to is not going to be comfortable with the fact that your ID says something different than what they expect you to look like.
So you need something other than the fact that you want to live as a man or a woman. You need some kind of physical change or reality to support that.
Personally, again, it is, some people don't need physical changes. They might just present differently or even just ask people to call them by different words. But I personally am taking testosterone, which is the male hormone, which is why my voice is slightly deeper than most people who were assigned female at birth. And it will also eventually kind of change my physiology slightly to look more masculine. And that is so that I can feel more comfortable with my presentation, and also so that people will not misgender me, so look at me and think, okay, well, that's a girl. You know what I mean? So it's by moving towards a different way of looking, I can get the response from people that I want without having to worry that I will get that negative reaction. And like Jennifer said, it is a process of coming out every single time you speak to someone. You need to go to the hospital, you have to come out to them, you need to go and to register for anything, you need to show your ID. Even the library asks you what your gender is before you sign up for a library card, right? So every time it's, well, you know I look different than you might expect me to, but really, that's not who I am.
Right. So you were born as a female?
Yeah, I was assigned female at birth.
Okay. You keep saying assigned female. You make that. I find that interesting that you make that distinction.
Yeah, it's it kind of because gender is not as simple as you see someone who's born and you know what gender they are, because it's a baby. It doesn't really have an identity yet. So you kind of look at this baby.
Well, it has. If it's male, it has male body parts.
Yeah, but those are your sex characteristics and not your gender, right? So, because gender is kind of the whole societal perception of what it means to be a boy or a girl, whereas your sex characteristics are more about your body parts, what hormones you might produce, what secondary sex characteristics you have, like facial hair, for example.
If I could jump back in, sex and gender are not the same thing, specifically for trans people. People who are not trans would identify with sex and genders that usually correspond with each other. And that's ultimately what we're talking about here, is the dichotomy, really, between the two. And I guess another concern I have, it's great to hear the last caller talk about how we're leaders in terms of the education
reason Pride Parades are so important is because we're marching for the people who can't. Like, we're basically like representing everybody who would like to be out of the closet, but they're afraid to face discrimination, or people who are, being killed because of who they are. We are marching for everybody. We're, standing up and just letting everybody know that it's okay to be who you are. And unfortunately, if you are in a certain circumstance and you can't be who you are, then we will march for you, and we will make sure that we will do you proud.
Jennifer, do you want to say a few words before you go?
Yeah, I guess one quick, educational point. Gender and sexual orientation are not binary matters. They are sliding scales and spectrums, and I think we all need to also think about that. Some people who identify trans may also identify as heterosexual, where some trans identified people identify as homosexual, and some might identify as bisexual. And likewise, as Jamie was talking about earlier, there's limits. Some people want a complete 100% transition, where others are kind of somewhere in that gray area. And I think we as a society need to stop thinking of these three entities as binary and just start recognizing us all as human beings, because ultimately that's what we all are.
All right, Jennifer, thanks for your call this afternoon.
Thank you.
722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. We're talking about the LGBT community, lesbian, bisexual, gay, and transgender community, and the thoughts you might have on it. My guests here in the St. John's studio, Robin Noseworthy and Jamie Harnham. They're both vice presidents of St. John's Pride, Inc. Danny Combs, who's the president of St. John's Pride, he's in our studio in Corner Brook. One of the things we talked about earlier was the New Glasgow attack. Robin, you made the point that it may or may not be precipitated by homophobia. There was also an attack in St. John's that people worried may or may not have been precipitated by homophobia. Does that bother you when there's a gay bashing that it may turn out to be not true?
If it all comes out in the woodworks that it isn't true, then yes, it absolutely bothers me. However, from a personal standpoint, I have my opinions that I'm not willing to go into right now. And from a Pride standpoint, we are an organization that, obviously supports if homophobic actions take place. And because it is such a topic right now that is still under investigation, still kind of being questioned, and there's such a divide in the community, I feel like as a member of the organization, I really cannot comment either way about that incident.
But you weren't satisfied, as some people might do, to latch onto the New Glasgow incident as being a gay bashing. You took a more reasoned approach that it may not have been gay bashing.
I take the approach of don't make a statement until you know the facts. And the facts will come out, and then my opinions will be formed then.
Are there internal divisions in the gay community about how certain issues should be faced, Jamie?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, every community will have different ways of approaching things. For me, my focus is not so much on these individual incidents, but what happens in the community at large after an incident like this happens. So, like, if people aren't showing their support for someone who makes these kinds of claims, then it creates an environment where people feel like these homophobic actions might be accepted or might not be challenged as much as they should be. And obviously this is my personal opinion because I can't speak for the community at large and how they view issues like this. But yeah, that's my main worry, is that if we don't take claims seriously, that it can be detrimental, because then you worry, regardless of the individual incident, you worry about who's out there and what they might be thinking.
Well,
one thing that I will say about it is that, through, like I said, the readings and stuff, the investigation is going on in New Glasgow. Investigations were going on here. What I don't like is that, in New Glasgow they seem to be more accepting of, this is a homophobic act, whereas here it was claimed by the person himself that it was homophobic, and there's such a divide. I think there's a huge provincial issue going on here right now in terms of, and this goes to Newfoundland being so, again, out of date with things that are going on. Like Jamie said, if someone claims that they're being discriminated against and there's homophobia happening to them, nobody cries rape without having to have someone stand behind them and accept it. That is such a scary thing to have happen. So I don't want to say whether or not the incident happened, but I want to say that we are open to listening to people and having them be supported in whatever way that they feel that they need to be supported. I don't think that we need to have an opinion over this happened or it didn't happen. Just know that something is going on, and, behind whatever that means, but I feel that we cannot make an opinion on investigations that are still ongoing.
Do you think we in Newfoundland are a little backward in our approach to it? And that was the question I was putting to Jennifer McCreath about whether her experience in another province was different from Newfoundland. And I don't know if it's my small town mentality, but I tend to think it must be tougher for people to come out in the smaller areas than it is in larger areas. Danny, what about you? Am I right or what?
Well, absolutely, because again, Corner Brook, it's not big, but it's not small. And when I came out, there was probably like me and like somebody else, and it did I got really stupid questions asked to me, like oh, you're gay, so you sit down to pee, and I'm like, what does that even mean? And like a lot of like small mind mentality. People, saying stuff to me, like they would even bully my little sister, and they said, your brother's gay, so you obviously have to be a lesbian. And just, small town mentality like that, but, again, I moved to St. John's, and when I came back, it looks like education actually, hit Corner Brook once they realized that once they get out of high school, there's actually a life outside of high school. They have, like, uncles, cousins, family members, even friends that come out of the closet. And they basically had to smarten up and actually, start asking questions and get to know the LGBT community. And so since I've been out here, like it's been nothing but pleasant. I love coming back to Corner Brook. Every single time I come out, I love it.
Yeah. What about you, Jamie? Do you see any signs of discrimination or rumblings of people talking behind your back about some of the things you might be a little more overt about?
Well, like I mentioned, I am very fortunate where most of my close circle of friends is very well educated about queer issues, so there's not a whole lot of ignorance about those topics. And I guess for me, that's probably the biggest difference between being in a smaller community and being in a larger one like St. John's, is that there are more support networks that are available to you. You know that, for example, there are organizations that are active, like St. John's Pride, that are doing things for the queer community, so you know that there are people out there that you can reach out to if you need to, versus if you're in a smaller community, people might not be as overt about their sexuality, and so you might not know. You might feel like, again, like Danny was talking, like you're the only gay in the village. Even if you're not, it's still very alienating to feel that way.
Tell me, Robin, you were saying that there's a difference in how the transsexual community fits into our community in Newfoundland as opposed to it does in other parts of the world. Is the transgender community an equal part of LGBT in other parts of Canada? Or are they more of a separate entity, transgender?
You mean in terms of the LGBT organizations?
Yes.
I think right now there's a huge divide that's going on between the transgender network and LGBT networks for some. We don't take that stance. We take that everybody is united, everybody needs to work together. We are only as weak as, our weakest perseen, and I say that in quotation marks if you can't see it on the radio, but I say that in terms of, we fight for who we need to see fights for. When we see legislation in Newfoundland and we see that, the trans rights and stuff are not being up to code with some of the other, provinces in Canada, this raises a huge flags for us. I do know that in Toronto and I think Seattle, they have, in the last year, at their Pride parades, they had different trans committees, and they seem to have gone head-to-head against the LGBT Pride networks and saying that they're being left out. And this is something that over the last couple of years, especially 2 years ago when I was on the Pride Board before, and even this year, St. John's was the first city to raise a trans flag with the Pride flag when we did our opening ceremony last summer. And with that, in terms of St. John's Pride, I think that, speaks for itself in terms of what we are trying to create here and what we are trying to say, and that it's saying that we are all together in this together, and that if your rights are being violated, it's just wait until tomorrow when mine will be too, and we need to just fight together to make everybody equal.
It's difficult in some areas, and Jamie, I want to ask you, because as you explain the transgendered nature, do you understand how complicated that is for someone like me to understand that,
Of course, yeah, and I mean, like, gender is immensely complicated. I mean, especially for people who are going through realizing that they want to transition in one way or another, that they are transgender. Like, obviously we can understand how confusing that can be, because we ourselves have gone through that confusion and wondered, okay, well, what does this mean that I don't feel like I fit? Like, how am I supposed to deal with this when there doesn't seem to be any way for me to get out of this box that I've been put into when I was born, right? Like, so obviously we've gone through that confusion ourselves. And I mean, it is a learning process, and it is, again, like Robin's been mentioning, and like Susan mentioned when she called in, it's so much about educating people and giving them a frame of reference to know what this stuff means, because that's the hardest part for people, right? When they come out as transgender and they come out again and again and again, every time they have to explain it because people just don't know, and that's not their fault, but it is something that we need to bring more to the forefront so that people can know and have a frame of reference for that.
Tell me, Danny, before I let you go, what's your message to people who are listening now who might not quite understand some of the complexities of this community?
Well, the way that I look at everything is, because I understand that people are afraid of the unknown. If they don't know something, they either make fun of it or, they just try to shut it out of their lives. Like, the best way it is, like, if you have questions about anything that you don't know about, like, how come there's homosexuals, or how come, we have parades, or everything like that, just either ask them or, just go online. You have to educate yourself so you can be aware of your surroundings, because, we are just like you. We pay rent, and, we go to jobs. We are just as miserable as you.
Robin, how about you? What parting words do you have?
Just for anybody that, is going through anything, to know that, you're not alone, that organizations are out there that can help you, and that, there are places to go. LBGT Mon is one. There is now retraining in schools that are going on. Just there will always be somebody there, and that's part of the reason why our organization is what it is.
And tell me, just very quickly, have we moved at least beyond the religious bigotry of the Bible thumpers condemning that community?
I think that we are on our way to that. I don't think that it's fully eradicated.
All right. What about you, Jamie? Any parting words from you?
I guess just what I was saying, basically, that it is, like, if you are having a hard time understanding some of the stuff that's going on around you, like, there are people that are willing to answer questions, and there are lots of really great resources that are available in the community.
All right. Thanks. I can't believe the hour's up, but listen, I want to thank you, Robin Nosworthy and Jamie Harnham, for coming into our studio in St. John's, and Danny Coombs, thanks for coming into our studio in Corner Brook.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That'll do it for us for today on Radio Noon. I'm John Furlong. Thanks so much for listening. If you didn't get a chance to call in, don't forget our noon line numbers, 576-5262, 1-800-576-5262. Drop me a note, radionoon.nl@cbc.ca. That'll do it for Wednesday. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.
This is CBC News. I'm Maggie Gillis. We begin with yesterday's double homicide in Conception Bay South. A man and a woman were shot and killed at Villanova Plaza in Manuels at about 7 p.m.